Looking to invest? Start your journey by exploring exchange-traded funds with Global X ETFs. Exchange-traded funds, or ETFs for short, create baskets of stocks, bonds, and other assets that you can buy in a single trade. Global X specializes in ETFs that track emerging trends, like the rise of artificial intelligence, as well as strategies aimed to generate income potential. Visit globalxetfs.com to discover how you can get started.
I wanted to have a guest come in to talk about what happened with the jobs report yesterday, but also just the overall state of the economy. And there's nobody better than E.J. Antony, who works as an economist at the Heritage Foundation. He also works with me as a visiting fellow at the Unleash Prosperity. E.J., thanks for joining this afternoon.
No, Steve, thank you for having me.
So a lot to talk about, EJ, and we don't have a whole lot of time because I do want to get to our callers. But I thought of you because you've been analyzing a lot of this employment data, and everybody's telling me how great it is. And there's no question it was a good, solid report. Thank God. But one of the things that you sent me that caught my eye, and forgive me if I'm not interpreting this data correctly, but as I look at your charts and your analysis, it appears to me that over the last 12 months or so, that the government sector of our economy, the public sector, the federal government, our states and our localities have added something like 500,000 additional workers. Is that correct?
Right. We're basically looking at half of all of the job growth that we've seen over the last year come from taxpayer dollars. And a lot of that obviously is just direct hiring by government, but you also have what you might call indirect hiring by government.
Yes,
that's where, as you know, Steve, if the government, let's say, gives a grant to a private school or a private hospital, which hires a teacher or a nurse, then that's still funded by taxpayer dollars.
Well, another good example of that, EJ, would be all this green energy. And we're spending, I think Kamala Harris was boasting that she and Joe Biden have spent $1 trillion on green energy. Well, those aren't, so you have these people making solar panels. Those aren't real jobs because it's all just funded by taxpayer money. And that must be a huge part of the employment as well.
Oh, absolutely, and that is a big reason why so many of the manufacturing jobs that we've seen over the last couple of years are not representative of real growth in the economy. You have people making products that are literally selling at a loss, but for all of the government subsidies.
Right. What is it that some of these car companies have lost like $40,000 per electric vehicle or something like that? I mean, the numbers are astounding.
Exactly, Steve. You're 100% right. And the crazy thing is when Ford publishes numbers like that, saying we're losing tens of thousands of dollars per vehicle, we should keep in mind that that's after they've already received tens of thousands of dollars in subsidies.
How do you lose money when they're paying you all this money to make it? And, they're paying all these, they're paying the people to buy them and they still won't buy the electric vehicles. I mean, it's a joke. But I want to get back to the direct government jobs, if I may, because you're right. Also, healthcare, at least half the healthcare jobs are tied specifically to government because government taxpayers are paying for half the healthcare system, right?
Right, exactly. And the other thing that we should draw attention to is the difference between payrolls and people employed. So, as you know, Steve, these reports are made up of two different surveys. There's a survey of households that asks people, are you employed or not? That's where we get the unemployment rate. And then there's a survey of businesses as well as the government where we ask how many people are on your payroll? How many payrolls do you have? And what's really scary is that in this last report, if we look at the household survey, the number of people saying they work for the government, all layers of government, federal, state, local, exploded by 785,000 in a single month. So that's what really drove the unemployment rate down to 4.1%. If government doesn't hire all of those people last month, the month of September, the unemployment rate would go up. It would have gone up to about 4.5%.
Well, it's by the way, you can't have a government job without somebody in the private sector subsidizing that job, right? So that you can't build an economy on the back of government unless you're an entirely socialistic economy. And I'm troubled by this because for another reason, EJ, and that is that I was just looking at the numbers, and I told our listeners this earlier, but I think it bears repeating that the fiscal year ended on October 1st. So we're now in fiscal year 2025 right now. But the 2024 numbers, they're not exact. They haven't done the exact count, but the latest estimate is that we borrowed $2.3 trillion in 2024. And forgive me, but I thought that was supposed to be an expansion year, a recovery year. We weren't in a recession. How and why in the world are we borrowing $2.3 trillion in an economy that's supposed to be in a recovery?
Probably for the same reason that Harris is bragging about spending $1 trillion on so-called green energy. We're wasting all this money at a breakneck pace. And Steve, I remember, I'm sure you do too, back when the Treasury was estimating that for last fiscal year the deficit was only going to be about $1.7 trillion. And oops, we were off by $600 billion. I mean,
amazing.
This is maddening. But it's what happens when the government wastes so much money.
Yeah. So on the job front, what's going on with what I call the makers of the economy? People in construction, people in business services, people in manufacturing. Those numbers don't look so good now, do they?
No, especially once we start adding in the benchmark revision. So this is an annual process that the Bureau of Labor Statistics does, where they take much more comprehensive data and they adjust the monthly jobs numbers in order to try to get things as accurate as possible. They don't do that to begin with because the data is just not available right away. So take manufacturing, for example, Steve. Since the beginning of 2023, we've actually been losing manufacturing jobs, but not that much. Once you factor in that annual benchmark, though, which will be finally added in once we get the January data for 2025, that's when we incorporate those numbers. Manufacturing, as of right now, is off by almost 140,000 jobs. So the sector is not doing very well. The problem is we just haven't added in all of those losses yet to the official totals.
So we just have about a minute and a half left, EJ, and great information you're providing my listeners. So thank you very much. This is EJ Antony, who's one of the chief economists at the Heritage Foundation and also works with me at Unleash Prosperity. By the way, if you're not getting the Unleash Prosperity hotline, shame on you. You should get it because it's free. All you have to do is go to unleashprosperity.com, sign up, and you'll get it every morning. And it's a great source of information on the economy and politics. But EJ, I am concerned about what's happening with worker paychecks. And I saw our Treasury Secretary the other day saying that Janet Yellen saying, workers are now, they're ahead of the game. But when I look at the data, if you look at like those, and you've been one of the experts on this, looking at the weekly earnings of American middle-class workers, it's still down a bit, isn't it, under Biden?
It is. It's down several percent. And, that may not sound like much, but for the typical American family, you're talking about thousands of dollars per year in lost purchasing power.
Would it be, so when you say, what's your best estimate? I've been using the number 2,000. Is that about right? Or what is your estimate?
I think it's closer to 3,000. Now we'll have a better sense of that next week. Once we get the inflation data for the month of September.
So hold on, DJ, because I want to make sure people understand what we're talking about. The numbers that EJ Antony are telling you are the important ones. That for the average family in America today, they're between $2,000 and $3,000 poorer than they were when Biden came in office. Is that a fair thing to say?
Absolutely, Steve. And that's despite the fact that the average American family's weekly paycheck is larger today than it ever has been before. The problem is prices have just gone up so fast.
Yeah.
Exactly. And Janet Yellen loves to talk about how, we've made progress over the last year. Well, that's true, but what about the 2.5 years before that where we fell behind?
We dug ourselves in a pretty deep hole. And by the way, that the numbers for under the Trump were not negative 2,000. They were about positive 5,000. So that's an amazing contrast. EJ Antony, thanks for joining at the last minute and giving us your up-to-date information about what's happening with the economy. Folks, we'll be right back. This is the More Money Show on WABC.